There's a point in life where your mind gets tired. Not tired from work or stress or even pain. It gets tired of caring too much, of overthinking every conversation, of replaying what someone said 3 days ago, of wondering whether you're being judged, misunderstood, ignored, or simply forgotten. And you tell yourself, I need to stop caring. But here's the problem. Most people think that means going numb, shutting everything down, cutting off emotion, faking apathy. And that's not strength, that's escape. So what if I told you the real way to stop caring without going numb is a skill, a mental discipline, a system you can train like a muscle? And if you stay with me until the end, I'll give you one practice so brutally effective, you'll never see approval seeking the same way again. But first, let's rewind. Because caring too much isn't a flaw. It's a survival instinct, left over from when being accepted by your tribe meant life or death. Your brain evolved to track what others think, to scan for disapproval, to avoid rejection like it's physical pain, which to your nervous system it is. That's why one snide comment from a stranger on the internet can ruin your day. That's why silence from someone you admire feels worse than direct hate. Your brain is still trying to protect you from a world that doesn't work like that anymore. Here's the twist. The goal isn't to stop caring about everything. It's to learn what deserves your care, your energy, your identity. Because most people don't actually care about others' opinions, they care about the meaning they attach to those opinions. And that distinction changes everything. Let's break it open. You're at a dinner. Someone makes a joke at your expense. Everyone laughs. Your stomach tightens. The old reflex kicks in. Defend yourself. Clarify. Maybe even try to win the room back. But deep down, you know the truth. That moment doesn't need your reaction. What it needs is mastery. The ability to zoom out and ask, does this define me, or does it just trigger me? See, that's the muscle we're going to build. Emotional distance without emotional shutdown. Detachment without indifference. Because here's the paradox. The less you react, the more control you gain. But the less you feel, the more alive you lose. There's a practice I'll share later that rewires this, literally teaches your nervous system how to stay calm in chaos. But before we get there, we need to understand something deeper. Most people are trapped, not by judgment itself, but by the possibility of judgment. It haunts them. The idea that someone somewhere might not approve, might disapprove, might misunderstand. So they live in a prison of imagined reactions, and they call that being self-aware. But it's not awareness. It's anxiety in a mask. And you can't fight anxiety with logic. You fight it by collapsing the loop. And the first loop to collapse is this one. If people like me, I'm safe. If they don't, I'm exposed. That loop, it's your leash. And every time you try to explain yourself to someone who already made up their mind, you tighten it. Let me ask you this. Have you ever over-explained yourself to someone and still felt misunderstood? Have you ever tried to clarify something over and over, and it only made things worse? Then you already know. Caring too much is not generosity. It's self-abandonment. It's placing your peace in the hands of people who wouldn't even notice if you lost it. And if that hits hard, good. It's supposed to. Because this isn't about being cold. It's about being clear. Clear about where your energy goes. Clear about what defines you. Clear about what you owe people and what you don't. The truth? You don't owe anyone your explanation, especially not when it's asked through judgment. Real questions deserve real answers. But performance anxiety, passive aggression, public jabs masked as jokes, that doesn't deserve your energy. It deserves your silence. There's a mental shift we're going to make, but it begins here. Not all care is noble. Sometimes it's just a survival strategy that's outlived its purpose. The same instinct that once protected your ancestors from exile is now hijacking your mental bandwidth with imaginary threats. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. So before we move deeper into how to train your mind, I want you to remember this. You don't need to stop caring. You need to start choosing who gets your care. That's where power begins. Now let's rip apart one of the biggest lies modern self-help teaches you, that you need to not care what anyone thinks. Sounds powerful, right? But it's a trap. Because it skips the most important question. Whose opinion do you care about? And why? You can't train your mind to stop caring by pretending judgment doesn't exist. You train it by learning which judgment sharpens you and which ones shrink you. You don't need to not care. You need to care precisely. Here's how it begins. Every time you react to someone's perception of you, you're letting their story rewrite your identity. Think about that. You're letting people who don't know your full truth install doubt into your mental operating system, and you do it without noticing. A sarcastic comment here, a backhanded compliment there, a subtle tone that makes you second-guess yourself for hours. They walk away and you stay stuck in an internal courtroom, defending yourself against charges no one even filed. This is the difference between being self-aware and being self-conscious. Self-awareness sees what's happening. Self-consciousness reacts as if it means something. And your mind, if left untrained, will treat every flicker of judgment like a code-red emergency. That's why so many people live in constant over-explanation. They apologize before they speak. They soften every opinion. They preface every boundary with disclaimers. They dilute themselves before anyone even asks them to. And here's the brutal truth. No one respects that. Not because you're weak, but because it signals weakness. People subconsciously trust what you trust. If you hesitate to own your truth, they hesitate to believe it. If you second-guess your tone, they second-guess your intention. If you bend over backwards to be liked, they assume you're not worthy of respect. The key isn't to fake confidence. The key is to remove the invisible weight, the pressure to manage perception, the anxiety of how will this make me look. That weight kills presence, and presence, your grounded, unbothered stillness, is the foundation of power. Here's a mind-bending reframe. What if being misunderstood isn't something to fear, but something to master? Think about the people who move through the world untouched by gossip, criticism, or shade. The ones who don't explain themselves, who don't clap back, who don't even flinch when attacked. Are they cold, or are they free? That's the energy we're training for. But it's not apathy. It's not arrogance. It's not some forced stoicism where you pretend nothing hurts you. It's awareness without attachment. Feeling what's real but not being ruled by it. Here's a practice to begin with. Something I call the 3-second scan. Next time you feel judged, doubted, or excluded, don't respond. Don't explain. Just scan your body for 3 seconds. Notice where the emotion sits. Is it in your chest, your jaw, your gut? Label it. Then ask yourself one question. Is this about truth or is this about trigger? Because once you separate truth from trigger, you're no longer reacting. You're choosing. And that's the training. That's how you stop caring, by upgrading your awareness, not numbing your emotion. Most people walk around with emotional open wounds. Every word becomes a weapon. Every look becomes a signal. Every pause in a conversation becomes a story. They must think I'm annoying. They didn't reply, so they hate me. They laughed too hard, so they were mocking me. Most of the time, it's not that deep. And when it is, you'll know. Because real disrespect isn't subtle, it's deliberate. And you'll respond not with overreaction, but with clarity. Let me give you a line you can use anywhere, anytime, when someone questions your worth. You're free to think what you want. Say it calmly. Say it once. Then stop. That line does two things at once. It shuts down the debate and reminds both of you that their opinion is theirs to carry, not yours. This is where emotional independence is born, not in some big dramatic confrontation, but in tiny moments where you choose to stay grounded while the world spins. But here's what most people get wrong. They think detachment means disengagement, that to protect yourself, you have to shut down, become cold, don't let anyone in. That's not mastery. That's a trauma response dressed up as strength. Real detachment doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you feel everything. But stay unshaken. You get rejected, and you still hold your posture. You get misunderstood, and you don't rush to perform a version of yourself for approval. You get insulted, and you let the echo die without your energy keeping it alive. That's power. And the next level of this, it's not just about dealing with people, it's about dealing with yourself. Because let's be honest, the harshest judgment you'll ever face is your own. We're going there next. Let's talk about the voice inside your head, not the one that hypes you up, pushes you forward, or keeps you focused. I'm talking about the other one, the subtle, slithering critic that whispers, "You're falling behind. You sounded stupid. They didn't reply because they don't respect you. You're too much. You're not enough." That voice isn't just annoying, it's corrosive. And here's the messed up part. You probably think it's you. It's not. That voice is a stitched-together echo of every standard you were ever pressured to meet, every sideways glance you internalized, every moment you were made to feel like your worth depended on how well you performed, how nice you were, how perfect you appeared. And now, it's become your default operating system. Here's where people get stuck. They try to shut that voice down with fake positivity. "I'm amazing. I don't care what anyone thinks. I love myself." But if your nervous system isn't on board, all you're doing is yelling affirmations into a storm. The voice doesn't go away because you pretend to be above it. It goes away when you train it to see you differently. Let me show you how. Imagine that critical voice as a scared assistant in your mind, trying to protect you the only way it knows how, by over-monitoring everything you say, do, wear, post, and feel. It's not evil. It's overworked and undereducated. And when you treat it like an enemy, it panics more. So try this instead. Next time it speaks, don't resist. Don't react. Respond. Not out loud. Internally. Calmly. It says, "You're being too quiet. People think you're boring." You say, "We don't need to perform for them. We're safe." It says, "You messed that up. They'll never take you seriously." You say, "We learn. That's what matters." It says, "You're behind everyone your age." You say, "We're not racing. We're building." Every time you respond with clarity instead of shame, you rewire that voice. You turn your mind from a battlefield into an ally. And you stop caring, not because you're numb, but because you're no longer arguing with your own worth. This is the missing step in every Stop Caring guide online. They tell you to ignore the noise, but they never teach you how to calm the source of it. And until you do that, your confidence will always be conditional. One compliment away from high, one insult away from collapse. But there's a deeper truth here. Sometimes we hold on to caring because it gives us something to chase. Approval becomes a substitute for purpose. Validation becomes our reward system. and we become addicted to external feedback, not because we need it, but because we've never built an internal scoreboard. So here's a hard question. When was the last time you defined your own win? Not what your parents think, not what your friends admire, not what society claps for. Your win. Because the moment you define it, you stop being a puppet for other people's praise. You stop performing. You stop caring whether you fit their mold. And suddenly, silence becomes strength. Rejection becomes redirection. And misunderstanding, it just becomes neutral. Let me tell you something no one says enough. It's okay to be misunderstood. You are not a public relations campaign. You don't need to clean up every opinion. You don't need to chase clarity with people who already chose confusion. Let them think what they want. Because the more time you spend correcting how others see you, the less time you have to build who you really are. This is the shift. You're not here to be digestible. You're here to be undeniable. Not by loudness, but by presence. A presence that doesn't flinch under scrutiny. A presence that doesn't shrink under misunderstanding. A presence that doesn't need to prove itself to feel real. And here's the twist. When you live that way, people do start to respect you more. Not because you begged for it, but because they can feel the difference. There's nothing louder than a person who no longer chases validation, because every word they speak, every boundary they hold, every silence they choose, feels deliberate. And that's what makes people lean in, because now they're not watching to judge you. They're watching to understand you. You didn't go numb. You didn't shut down. You trained your mind to stop caring about what weakens you and start defending what grounds you. That's a different game. That's the one we're playing now. You want to know when this training really gets tested? Not when you're alone. Not when you're journaling. Not when you're feeling peaceful after a long walk. It gets tested when someone pushes your button in public, when you're in a group, when everyone's watching, when someone makes that one sly comment, the one crafted to sting, designed to expose your sensitivity. That's when your body tenses up. Your nervous system says, react. Your brain lights up with 10 possible comebacks, and in that moment, most people crumble. Not because they're weak, but because they're untrained. They either laugh it off and betray themselves, or they snap and lose the frame entirely. But you're about to handle it differently, because the moment you feel that sting, you're going to pause. Not freeze, pause. A beat of stillness, a breath, a scan, no flinch, no apology, no performance, just awareness. That second of silence, it flips the dynamic. Now they don't know what's coming next. They wonder if they went too far. They look around, seeking validation for the jab they just threw, and the room doesn't respond. Because your lack of reaction just made their move look cheap. Then, if you need to speak, you do it from centered presence, not defensive chaos. Say something like, interesting take, or you seem off today. Or better yet, say nothing. Just hold your gaze, let the tension shift. You didn't explain. You didn't defend. You didn't escalate. You didn't shrink. You just stood in your power and let the emotional grenade roll past your feet. This is the kind of mental precision most people never develop because they're too busy trying to be nice or clear the air or keep the peace. But here's the Machiavellian truth. Trying to keep the peace often creates internal war. You silence yourself for others' comfort. You fake smiles to keep the vibe light. You water down your instincts until your self-respect drowns. But you're not doing that anymore. From now on, you're not here to soothe every room. You're here to stabilize your own. And that starts by understanding the power of not reacting. Let's anchor that with a phrase. Stillness over signal. Not every shot deserves a response. Not every comment deserves closure. Not every insult deserves to be unwrapped and analyzed. Sometimes the most strategic move is to stay exactly where you are and let the moment pass. Stillness is not submission. It's signal control. You're telling the room, this doesn't touch me. Not because you're above it, but because you're rooted in something deeper. Here's where most people trip up. They think silence equals weakness, that if you don't react, people will think you're passive. But the opposite is true. If your silence is paired with presence, people don't respect loudness. They respect certainty. And certainty doesn't shout. It watches. It waits. It lets people reveal themselves. And that's when your mind begins to rewire. You're no longer flinching at every jab. You're watching it unfold like a chess game. You're conserving your energy. You're not triggered, you're training. Training for what? Not just for power, for peace. Because when you stop overreacting to people's energy, you get to keep yours. And that's how you become dangerous in the best way. Let's apply this to your daily life. Someone texts you a passive-aggressive message. No paragraph reply. Just, noted, got it, or nothing at all. Someone criticizes you publicly. No defense, no thread. You let the silence do the work. If you reply, it's surgical. You're free to feel that way. Someone doubts your plan, your goal, your pace. You don't rush to prove. You don't ask for validation. You just keep moving and let your results do the explaining later. This is emotional discipline, not apathy, not ego, discipline. The art of choosing what matters enough to move you. And if nothing else, let this burn into your mind. You are not on trial. You don't need to make closing arguments for your choices. You don't need to be relatable to be respected. You don't need to be understandable to be valid. All you need is to be centered. And that brings us to the most important part, the final evolution of caring. The moment when caring becomes devotion, not desperation. We're going there next. So here we are. You've quieted the need to explain. You've slowed the reflex to please. You've reclaimed your energy from the mental tug-of-war of, do they like me or do they get me? And now, you're ready to rebuild. But here's the part no one tells you. Once you stop caring about what drains you, you start caring more deeply about what fulfills you. See, this isn't about detachment for the sake of detachment. This is about refocusing your care, taking it away from reactions and anchoring it in direction. Because when you stop giving your energy to everyone, you finally have enough left for yourself. That's when your mind gets quiet. Not numb, quiet, intentional. You start noticing how much of your identity was built as a performance, how many of your opinions were rehearsed for applause, how many of your boundaries were suggestions instead of rules, how many of your achievements were trophies for people you don't even respect. And you feel it, the ache of shedding what's not you. That's where most people panic. They think, if I stop caring about all of this, what's left? And the answer? You. Unfiltered, undiluted, unshakable. You start living from the inside out, not outside in. You stop waiting for others to choose you. You choose you. Every damn day. And ironically, that's when others do start to see you differently. Not as someone who doesn't care, but as someone who cares on purpose. There's a kind of presence you begin to carry. It doesn't need defending. It doesn't shrink for the insecure. It doesn't perform for temporary attention. It just is. And in that presence, the world starts treating you the way you finally decided to treat yourself, with respect or with distance. Both are welcome. Both are earned. Because the final level of this is clarity. crystal clear knowing, knowing what you value, knowing what moves you, knowing who you are without needing to announce it, without having to correct people's perception, without having to be everyone's favorite flavor. You're not trying to be bulletproof. You're building a mind that doesn't panic when it gets hit. You're not trying to impress. You're just not afraid to be seen fully. You're not seeking peace in silence. You're creating silence through inner peace. And all of this? It was never about becoming someone else. It was about returning to the you beneath the noise. So here's how we close. From now on, care only when it's rooted in clarity. Give your energy where it multiplies, not where it's mined. Speak only when it shifts the frame, not when it just defends your ego. And hold your silence like a sword, not as retreat, but as command. When someone throws shade, pause. When someone doubts you, smile. When someone misunderstands, let them. When the noise gets loud, go quiet, because stillness makes power louder. And when your mind starts to spiral into, what if they think? Cut it off with this. They're allowed to think. I'm allowed not to care. That's not a defense. That's not coldness. That's discipline. And that's what makes you unshakable. Because the goal isn't to stop feeling. It's to stop fearing what you feel. And once you do that, your mind is finally free.